The aroma of roasted turkey and pumpkin pie filled my aunt's expansive dining room, but all I could taste was bitterness. I sat at the far end of the table watching my family's annual Thanksgiving performance of success and superiority. So then, my cousin Anthony was saying, swirling his expensive wine, I told the board we needed to think bigger. That's how I landed the Morgan account. 200 million in new business just like that. He snapped his fingers, drawing appreciative murmurs from our assembled relatives. That's my boy, Uncle Peter beamed. Following in my footsteps, taking Harrison Financial to new heights. I pushed my food around my plate trying to become invisible. But of course that was impossible. In my family, if you weren't actively bragging about your latest achievement, someone would helpfully point out your failures. And what about you, Sophia? Aunt Diana's voice dripped with false concern. Still doing that? What do you call it? Consulting. All eyes turned to me. I straightened in my chair, keeping my voice steady. Yes, my firm is doing well, thank you. Anthony snorted into his wine glass. Firm? Don't you work out of your apartment? That's hardly what I'd call a firm. Now, my mother interjected, though her tone suggested she agreed with him. Sophia is finding her way. Finding my way. That's what they'd been saying for 3 years, ever since I left my prestigious position at Harrison Financial to start my own company. They couldn't understand why anyone would walk away from the family business, much less strike out on their own. Speaking of finding ways, Anthony continued, his smile sharp as a knife. Did you hear about our upcoming merger? Harrison Financial is about to acquire Summit Solutions. It's the biggest deal in the company's history. More impressed murmurs. More congratulatory nods. My uncle practically glowed with pride. The paperwork goes through next week, Anthony added. Once it's final, we'll be the largest financial services provider in the Northeast. I took a small sip of water, thinking about the documents sitting on my desk downtown. Documents that could shatter their perfect plans. Of course, my aunt said, some people prefer to stay small. There's nothing wrong with that, is there, Sophia? Nothing at all, I replied quietly. Sometimes small is exactly where you need to be. Anthony laughed outright. Small? Try microscopic. Honestly, Sophia, when are you going to admit that this little experiment of yours failed? Come back to Harrison Financial. I'm sure we can find you something appropriate to your skills. The way he said appropriate made it clear he was thinking of the mailroom. Thank you, but I'm happy where I am. Happy? My uncle scoffed. You can't be happy being a nobody. The Harrisons are leaders, innovators. Look at Anthony, youngest vice president in company history, about to close the biggest merger we've ever seen. That's what success looks like. I thought about the merger they were so proud of. About the hours I'd spent reviewing the details, finding the flaws, preparing my response. They had no idea that their perfect deal required my signature to go through. Actually, I started, but my mother cut me off. Sophia, darling, maybe it's time to be practical. Your father and I worry about you rattling around in that tiny office, playing at being a businesswoman. I'm not playing at anything, Mom. Oh, come on, Anthony interjected. Your largest client is a local bakery. Meanwhile, I'm handling accounts worth hundreds of millions. Face it, cousin, you're out of your league. My phone buzzed quietly in my lap. A message from my assistant. Final merger documents arrived. Your signature required as regulatory compliance officer. Harrison Financial has no idea it's you. I allowed myself a small smile. 3 years ago, when I left Harrison Financial, I hadn't just started my own consulting firm. I'd also begun building something much bigger. A compliance and regulatory oversight company that now held approval power over major financial mergers. Through careful maneuvering and shell companies, I'd positioned myself as the key signature needed for any major financial acquisition in the Northeast. Harrison Financial's big merger? It wouldn't happen without my approval. And they had no idea. Poor Sophia, my cousin Amanda Stage whispered to Anthony. Still a nobody after all this time. Remember when she thought she could do better than us? I stood up suddenly, my chair scraping against the hardwood floor. Excuse me, I need some air. Running away again? Anthony called after me. That's all you're good at. I stepped onto the back porch, breathing in the crisp November air. My phone buzzed again, another message from my assistant. Harrison Financial's lawyers are getting nervous. They need the compliance signature by Monday or the deal falls apart. Let them wait, I typed back. I'll handle it personally on Monday. Through the window I could hear my family still discussing my failures. How I'd thrown away a promising career. How I'd embarrassed the family name. How I'd never amount to anything. If only they knew that their precious merger, their crowning achievement, rested entirely in my hands. My uncle's voice carried through the glass. That's the problem with Sophia. No ambition, no drive. Not like Anthony. He understands what it means to be a Harrison. I leaned against the porch railing, remembering the day I'd walked away from Harrison Financial. I'd tried to warn them about their outdated practices, their regulatory vulnerabilities. But they wouldn't listen. Anthony had laughed in my face. What do you know about running a real business? So I'd left, taking my knowledge and experience with me. While they were busy mocking my tiny consulting firm, I was quietly building a regulatory empire. Every major financial merger in the Northeast now required approval from Phoenix Compliance Group, my company. My phone lit up with another message, this time from the regulatory board. Harrison Financial merger requires immediate attention. Significant compliance issues identified. I smiled, thinking about Monday morning's meeting. About walking into that boardroom not as failed cousin Sophia, but as the CEO whose signature they desperately needed. Through the window I could see Anthony holding court at the dinner table, probably sharing another story of his corporate brilliance. He had no idea that his moment of triumph was about to become something very different. Sophia. My mother's voice startled me. She'd stepped onto the porch, wrapped in her designer shawl. Don't you think you've hidden out here long enough? Your cousin is about to announce something important. Let me guess, more details about the magnificent merger? She frowned at my tone. You could learn a lot from Anthony's success, you know. Instead of being jealous, why not observe how a real business person operates? I bit back a laugh. I think I understand business pretty well, Mom. Filing paperwork for a bakery is hardly the same as handling multi-million-dollar mergers, she sniffed. Please just come back inside and try to be supportive. And do something about that attitude, it's not attractive. I followed her back into the dining room, where Anthony was indeed preparing to make an announcement. He stood, tapping his crystal wine glass with a silver spoon. Everyone, I have something special to share, he began, his chest puffing with pride. As you know, the Summit Solutions merger is a game-changer for Harrison Financial. What you don't know is that upon its completion, I'll be named the youngest chief operating officer in company history. The room erupted in applause. My aunt dabbed at her eyes with a silk handkerchief. My uncle beamed like he'd personally hung the moon. To Anthony, someone called out, "The future of Harrison Financial." I raised my water glass along with everyone else, hiding my smile behind the rim. "Oh, Anthony, your future isn't quite as secure as you think." Monday morning arrived with the kind of crisp clarity that only comes after a storm. I stood in my real office, not the small consulting space my family knew about, but the entire top floor of the Phoenix building downtown, and prepared for the meeting that would change everything. Harrison Financial's representatives are already in the conference room, my assistant informed me. Your cousin seems rather anxious. I smiled, adjusting my tailored blazer. 3 years of being the family failure. I think I can let him sweat for a few more minutes. I reviewed the merger documents one last time, noting all the compliance issues I'd flagged. Issues that Anthony, in his rush to claim glory, had completely overlooked. The same issues I'd tried to warn them about before leaving Harrison Financial. "Ms. Montgomery?" My assistant appeared again. "They're getting quite agitated. Mr. Harrison keeps demanding to know why the compliance officer is late. Tell them she'll be right in." I gathered my files and walked slowly toward the conference room, remembering Anthony's words from Thanksgiving. Poor Sophia, still a nobody. Well, cousin, let's see who's a nobody now. Through the glass walls I could see Anthony pacing, his perfectly styled hair slightly disheveled. My uncle sat at the head of the table, attempting to maintain his dignified facade but failing to hide his nervousness. The Summit Solutions executives looked increasingly uncomfortable. I pushed open the door. The reaction was immediate. Anthony froze mid-stride. My uncle's face went from red to white in seconds. The Summit Solutions CEO actually dropped his pen. What What are you doing here? Anthony sputtered. This is a private meeting. I know. I walked calmly to the head of the table. I'm the compliance officer you've been waiting for. Silence. Complete absolute silence. That's impossible, my uncle finally managed. The compliance officer is from Phoenix Compliance Group. They're the largest regulatory body in the Northeast. Yes, they are. I sat down, arranging my papers neatly. And I'm their CEO and founder. Anthony collapsed into his chair. No, you run that little consulting firm. You handle paperwork for bakeries. Oh, I do that too. It's amazing how much you can learn about regulatory compliance from small businesses. I smiled. But Phoenix Compliance Group? That's my real company. The one you were too busy mocking me to notice. The Summit Solutions CEO leaned forward. Ms. Montgomery, I don't understand. Why didn't you disclose this connection earlier? Because until now there was nothing to disclose. I've recused myself from all Harrison financial matters due to family connections. I pulled out the compliance report. But this merger? The irregularities are too significant to ignore. Irregularities. My uncle's voice cracked. What irregularities? I began listing them off. Undisclosed liabilities. Questionable accounting practices. Labor law violations. And that's just the beginning. I looked directly at Anthony. The same issues I warned you about 3 years ago, cousin. The ones you said I was too inexperienced to understand. Anthony's face had taken on a greenish tint. This is a vendetta. You're just angry because we didn't appreciate your what? My expertise. My understanding of regulatory compliance. My ability to build something bigger than you could imagine. I spread the documents across the table. Every issue in this report is meticulously documented. Your merger can't proceed without addressing them. You can't do this, my uncle exploded. We're family. Family. I laughed softly. Was it family when you mocked my career choices? When you called me a failure at every holiday? When you dismissed every attempt I made to help your company improve? The Summit Solutions executives were gathering their papers. Perhaps we should postpone this discussion. No. Anthony lunged forward. This merger has to happen. My promotion, my future. Should have been based on competence rather than arrogance, I finished for him. I'm not blocking the merger, Anthony. I'm requiring you to fix the problems. Problems I identified 3 years ago before they became critical. My uncle's lawyer cleared his throat. Ms. Montgomery, surely we can come to some arrangement. The only arrangement I'm interested in is full compliance with regulatory requirements. I stood up. You have 48 hours to address these issues, or I'll be forced to file a formal objection to the merger. 48 hours? Anthony's voice rose to a squeak. That's impossible. Not impossible. Just difficult. Perhaps you should spend less time bragging at family dinners and more time doing your actual job. As the room erupted in chaos, my phone buzzed. A text from my mother. Why is your uncle calling me in a panic? What have you done? I typed back. Ask Anthony. I'm sure he'd love to explain how his nobody cousin now controls his future. The Summit Solutions team was already leaving, their enthusiasm for the merger clearly dampened. My uncle sat slumped in his chair, looking older than I'd ever seen him. And Anthony just stared at me like he was seeing a stranger. How? He whispered. How did you build all this without us knowing? Because you didn't want to know, I replied simply. You were so convinced of my failure that you never bothered to look beyond the surface. Every time you mocked my little consulting firm, I was building something bigger. Every time you dismissed my concerns about compliance, I was proving them right. But at Thanksgiving you let us think. I let you think what you wanted to think. Just like I've been doing for 3 years. I gathered my papers. By the way, that bakery client you laughed about. They're now a national chain, fully compliant with all regulatory requirements. Because sometimes, cousin, the people you dismiss as nobodies are actually changing the world while you're busy talking about changing it. The next 48 hours were exactly what you'd expect. My family alternated between fury and desperate attempts at reconciliation. My mother left tearful voicemails about family loyalty. My aunt tried to persuade me that Anthony had learned his lesson. I responded to all of them the same way. Fix the compliance issues or the merger fails. They fixed them. They had no choice. Harrison Financial's stock had already taken a hit just from the delay, and Anthony's perfect reputation was showing serious cracks. The merger eventually went through, though on vastly different terms than Anthony had originally planned. He didn't get his COO position. Instead, the board insisted on appointing a new compliance officer, someone who actually understood regulatory requirements rather than just talking about them. My uncle retired 6 months later, citing health concerns. In reality, the board had pushed him out, having finally realized how many issues he'd overlooked over the years. I continued building my empire, expanding Phoenix compliance group's reach beyond the Northeast. These days when I attend family gatherings, which is rare, no one calls me a nobody. They don't call me anything at all. They just watch quietly, probably wondering what other surprises I'm hiding. Last week, I received an invitation to Anthony's holiday party. The note attached was clearly written under duress. I hope you can attend. Your expertise would be valuable to our discussions. I sent back my regrets. I was too busy running my multi-billion-dollar company to attend. Sometimes success isn't about proving others wrong. Sometimes it's about proving yourself right so definitively that they have no choice but to face their own failures. The small consulting office downtown? I kept it. It reminds me of where I started and why. Every morning I stop there before heading to my real office. I help small businesses navigate regulations, build sustainable practices, and grow. Because sometimes the biggest victories come from the smallest beginnings. And sometimes the person they dismiss as a nobody becomes the somebody they can't afford to ignore. Anthony still works at Harrison Financial, though in a much smaller office. I hear he's actually had to start doing real work instead of just talking about it. Apparently, compliance issues are a lot harder to ignore when your cousin owns the compliance company. Success, I've learned, doesn't need to announce itself. It doesn't need to brag at family dinners or demand attention at holiday gatherings. Real success builds quietly, steadily until one day you walk into a room and change everything just by being who you've become. The best revenge isn't destroying your critics. It's succeeding so completely that they're forced to admire what they once dismissed. And sometimes, just sometimes, it's watching their faces when they realize that the nobody they mocked now holds the power to approve or deny their dreams.